Okay, welcome everyone. Good evening. Shalom Aleichem. Excuse my voice. It's still recovering a little bit from Simchas Torah. Welcome. This is the Haskalah of Taaruvos, Siman Sadiches. I think our minhag is we're gonna begin by giving everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves. Briefly, you could say your name. You could give a bio. You don't have to. You could just say where you live. We'll try to do it quick, and we'll start with the Menahel, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi.
Rosa, Queens.
Welcome, Marhaba.
Yehuda Marciano from Farakoy.
Yehuda Marciano from Farakoy.
Donnie Saucin, Cedarhurst.
Donnie Saucin, Cedarhurst.
Mandy Friedlander, Woodmere.
Mandy Friedlander, Woodmere.
Yehuda Schwartz, Farakoy.
Yehuda Schwartz, Farakoy.
Shalom Katz.
Some cats Inwood.
Berkowitz, West Hempstead.
Yaman Gallus in the Cedars.
Welcome. Yeah.
David Weiner, Woodmere.
Doc.
Shemshon Greenberg, Queens.
Shamshi Eisenberger, Lawrence.
Okay, we'll go online. We're gonna go on my screen, top right hand corner.
That me?
No, that's the last name is Glatstein.
My name is Glatstein. First name Yosef Menachem. Please call me Yossi.
Okay, that's my father. Okay, and now I'm by last name Moskowitz. You're muted. You could unmute. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm trying to unmute you. I'll introduce you. You're Rabbi Eliezer Moskowitz. Where do you live? So I can't read lips. Sorry.
If you press the space button, you'll unmute.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh,
Go for it. What?
Eliezer Moskowitz from Lakewood.
Lakewood. Okay.
Eliezer Moskowitz from Lakewood.
Okay. Welcome. It says on your thing, last name Bernath.
Shia Bernath, Muncie.
Welcome. That's me. Last name Portnoy.
Zevi Portnoy from Lakewood.
Zevi Portnoy. Welcome. I would say your first name, but sometimes the first name doesn't. It's more okay. Next, it says last name Das Gupta.
Rishon Sofer Das Gupta from Manhattan.
Welcome. Welcome. Okay, Burbach. You're muted, so I don't hear you. I'm sorry. You're still muted. I'm asking. Okay, when we figure out how to unmute you. PW.
What did I do wrong?
You're good. I'm asking you to introduce yourself. Dr. Pinchas. What?
Bratzlavsky from San Diego.
Pinchas Ratzlavsky, San Diego. Okay. Grumberger. Sorry.
Ari Grumberger from Brooklyn, New York.
Okay. Welcome. Yisrael Schwartz.
Paul Schwartz from Tom's River, New Jersey.
Baruch haba. Okay. Aryeh. Is that your last name?
Aryeh.
Aryeh.
So we say Aryeh.
Aryeh. Okay. Where are you from?
Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
Today is my wife's due date, but Baruch Hashem, they're waiting for me to do this year.
Okay. Yeah. Tell her to hang in there until the share is over. I always wait. My minhag is I wait until the end of the share. We tried it a few times. It usually works. Okay. Okay. MN. MN. I see.
Moshe Newman from Farakoy.
Moshe Newman. Okay. Finkelstein. I see.
Shui Finkelstein, Howell, New Jersey.
What's your first name?
Shui.
Shui. Okay. Good. What it says. Okay. Gross.
Neil Groves, Cleveland, Ohio.
Ah, very good. Greenberger. That's the furthest we have so far. Cleveland. Oh, San Diego. Excuse me.
Diego.
San Diego. No, you're right.
Yeah, we're not that bad.
Yeah. Okay. Greenberger.
My name is Sholi Greenberger. I live in Flatbush. I'm looking at the screen. I see some good old friends here from a long time ago. Some that I know. And we're also, it's a duo. My son-in-law is there in person. If you Shalom Katz with Inlet, so we
Oh. Yeah. He's here.
Yeah. He told me he's there. I heard him. Hi, Shalom.
Yeah. Hi, Shalom. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Atkin Meir from Returnee. Okay.
Yes, attorney Mayor Atkins from Lakewood, New Jersey.
Okay. Hi, Meir.
Happy to be back.
David address.
Dublin address, Staten Island. Happy
Okay.
to be back.
Welcome back with David. Yossi Farkas.
Yossi Farkas from Tom's River, New Jersey.
We have a nice Tom's River Chabura. Okay. Nassim Wadler.
That's the Wilder from Muncie.
Hi. Well, Yerushalayim. If you take Yerushalayim, you get the furthest.
I know, but I'm in Muncie now.
Okay. Gabriel Bloom. Yeah?
Gabriel Bloom, yeah, Queens, New York.
Yaakov.
Yaakov Schiff, Lake Jersey.
Yaakov?
Schiff.
Yaakov Schiff. Very nice. Sroli Schwartz. Yeah?
It's really Schwartz from London.
Oh, I got a winner. It's London. Okay. What does he get if he's the furthest?
Gets to go to sleep.
Yeah, it's pretty late. What, you're 5 hours ahead?
Now, this week we're 4 hours ahead. Because we moved the clocks already.
Okay.
This week will be 5 hours.
Kala Kabod. Rishaya Friedman.
Hi, Shia Friedman from Seif.
Very good. Yaakov, another Yaakov. Are you this different Yaakov?
Yeah, I am. Yaakov Satan.
Yaakov, I'm sorry? Yeah.
Satan.
Okay. Which Yaakov is that? I see a Yaakov with Svarim behind you. That's the one I'm up to. You're muted, so I don't hear you. Okay, we'll come back to you. And do you know how to unmute? Can you unmute? Ah, there you go.
Yeah, Yaakov Schiff, Lakewood, New Jersey. I thought I went already, but I'm happy to do it.
Oh, okay, fine. I got confused between the two Yaakovs. No, sorry. So this is Yaakov Satan. Yeah, what did you say?
Yeah,
Yaakov Satan, where are you?
from Buenos Aires, Argentina, South America.
Ah, Argentina and London. You're closer in time zone, but you might be a further flight. What?
It's like 10 hours from New York.
Oh, you're further, but you're closer time zone. Okay, so I'll let you battle it out with Shirley Schwartz.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's just an hour.
Argentina, very nice. Actually, we had someone in Rechabur last year from Argentina, right? Okay. Moshe Friedman. Moshe?
Jersey.
I'm sorry, Lakewood?
From Lakewood, New Jersey.
Okay, welcome. And I see somebody in the bottom right. I don't see your name. You're driving, and it's light outside. Where are you? You're muted. I don't hear you, but this looks interesting. Where are you? You're in Brazil.
I'm from Brooklyn, but I'm in China right now. Thank you, everybody.
I knew this one was going to be good. Okay, what type of vehicle are you in?
I'm in like a small sprinter type of thing. I'm with my brother. He can't hear, but this is morning traffic.
Okay, no more questions. Okay, here we go. So welcome everyone, Bruchim Habayim. We're beginning Taaruvos. Taaruvos is Siman Tzadiches. Siman Tzadiches are the second part of Hilchos Isser V'Heter. Basar B'Chalav begins in Siman Pei Zayin, and Taaruvos begins in Siman Tzadiches. I once heard and I've since seen it in Seif from the Arizal. The Arizal says that the Ikar Limud is Limud Halacha. You know, Klal Yisrael by definition is wed to the Torah. Torah tziva lanu Moshe Meirasha Kilas Yaakov Al Tikri Meirasha Ela Meirasa. We're all wed to the Torah. We all have eris into the Torah. But in order to consummate the relationship, you need to learn it. So what should you learn? The Ari says the Ikar Limud. Now we don't. Not only the Ari, the Shach himself says the Ikar Limud is Limud Halacha. The Mishabur writes in his Hakdama, the Ikar Limud is Limud Halacha. But the Ari says the Ikar connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is by learning Halacha. Halacha is Oisiyos Hakala. Halacha is Oisiyos Hakala. If you want to, in other words, consummate your relationship with Hashem, it's not enough to have stood on Har Sinai, and it's not enough just to learn. You have to learn Halacha. It's interesting. I think that Hilchos Isser V'Heter plays a special role in Halacha. In any type of smicha program or program of Isser V'Heter, the crown of it is Basar B'Chalav Taaruvos. Why? We had a whole share in the Hakdama to Basar B'Chalav about, actually we're only Zoicha to the Torah because we're Zahir in Basar B'Chalav. When Hashem gave the Torah to Klal Yisrael, the Malachim said, why are you giving them the Torah? They don't deserve the Torah. Give the Torah to us. So Hashem said, I can't give you the Torah. When you went to the house of Avraham Avinu, you were nichshal in Basar B'Chalav. So you don't deserve the Torah. Meaning, the whole reason we're Zoicha to Torah is because we're Zahir in Basar B'Chalav. And we explained, the Zayar says that being careful in Basar B'Chalav shows that we're Banim Lamakayim. And Hashem only gave us a Torah because we're His children. So I have a very interesting remez, and I'll give you a hakdama. I once went to a shir from Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef. For those who listen to the shiurim, sometimes you probably know this, and he posed the following question, which I remember at the time I was embarrassed, I didn't know the answer to. Where in Yeridea is Hilchos Dagim? Nobody knew. Who could possibly remember where Hilchos Dagim is? Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef said, Siman Pei Gimel, Rashi Tevois, Gefilte fish. Siman Pei Gimel, Rashi Tevois, Gefilte fish. And he said, now since then, I found there's significance to a lot of the Simanim of Shulchan Aruch. First of all, Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes that the Simanim of Shulchan Aruch are Mamish Baruch HaKodesh. Hilchos Shofar is in Tav Kuf Pei-Vav, Gematria Shofar. Hilchos Shofar are in Tav Kuf Pei-Vav. So then I remember Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef said that Hilchos Kiddush are in Siman Reish Samach Gimel because there's a famous Kiddush of Reb Sadia Goin. And then there's a famous Vart that Hilchos Maver Sedra is in Siman Reish Pehei because people are weak in being Maver Sedra. That's Rafa Biyadenu. It's weak. People are weak at that. So since then, I remember Hilchos Tefillin are in Siman Chafhei Yad Keha. And my favorite is Hilchos Slichos are in Siman Taf Kuf Pei Aleph. Tough, because it's a tough time of the year, and Kuf Pei Aleph is you need coffee, you know. But what about Hilchos Taaruvos? So it's interesting in Shir Hashirim we say like this: Doidi Tzach v'Adaim Dagol Meravava. My beloved Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Tzach, he's white like milk. V'Adaim, he's red like meat. So to me, that's Basar B'Chalav. Doidi Tzach v'Adam. My beloved, especially if we only forge a relationship with Hashem by learning halacha. So Hashem is our beloved in the context of Tzach v'Adam when we learn Basar B'Chalav. So what Siman is Basar B'Chalav is? So Roishoi Kesem Paz, Siman Pei Zayin. Roishoi Kesem. So you start in year one with Roishoi Kesem Paz, Siman Pei Zayin. But where is Taaruvos? Taaruvos is Doidi Tzach, Siman Tzadichas. Okay, that's just my remez b'shir hashirim le-Chavra de Hilchos Aminayin. Okay, we're going to begin. Siman Tzadiches. Siman Tzadiches talks about mixtures. We're going to begin by talking about mixtures lach, in wet. Basically, we're going to talk about two types of mixtures, where it gives taste, where it doesn't give taste. Usually something will give taste when something falls into an item of a different taste. In order to give taste to something, you have to have a different taste than the item that you're falling into. It's called min b'she'enoi minoi. If it's the same taste, if in other words, let's say you have a piece of nevela meat that falls into kosher meat, it's not going to give any taste. It's the same exact taste. It's not noisein tam. But if, let's say, meat falls into fat, or fat, forbidden fat, falls into meat, and they have different tastes, so then it's noisein tam. There's min b'she'enoi minoi, that's noisein tam. There's min b'minoi, einoi noisein tam. Now when it's min b'she'enoi minoi and it's noisein tam, you need 60 midoiraisa. Biblically, you need 60, because we have a tradition, when you have something 60 times that amount, it's mevatel the tam. It's batel b'shishim. Okay? However, if it's min b'minoi, if it's the same taste, so then you don't need shisha midoiraisa, you only need roiv, because achay rabim lahatos, you follow the roiv. Then shishim would only be needed midrabanan. Okay? 60 is needed midoiraisa when you need to be mevatel taste. 60 is only needed midrabanan when you don't need to be mevatel taste. You just don't want to get it confused with min b'she'enoi minoi. So here's how I like to do it. I read the Mechaber and Ramah inside. We're going to learn all the main opinions and ideas of the Shach and Taz, all the conclusions of the Shach and Taz, and read inside, all the main lumdus of the Shach and Taz, and read inside. But the Shach could be very lengthy, and he brings many rayas. The Chida even says that it is not humanly possible for a flesh and blood to write the Shach, and he didn't. He utilized hashva'as kolmas. He summoned the pen. He caused the pen to swear, and the pen wrote. The Chida brings down that it was not humanly possible for the Shach to summon so many proofs. It was written in a supernatural way. So we're not reading every single line in the Shach and Taz inside. We're going to read the main lines. Now, officially, I'm supposed to read it to you from this Chavra the Hilchos book. And when they ask, did Rabbi Glatstein read it from the Chavra Hilchos book, you're going to say yes. But I don't usually do it. I like to read it from my big Shulchan Aruch. And I'm not going to say officially you should get a big Shulchan Aruch. So I'm unofficially saying it's worthwhile to have a Shulchan Aruch because my favorite thing is, let's say, no one on Zoom is allowed to answer. Any day that you learn blank is a good day. Rabbi Kiva Eger. Okay, I like to do Rabbi Kiva Egers because that's where the juice is. That's the lamdos. I'm focusing more on the principles of the Shach and Taz than the halacha l'maisa. Okay, and sometimes I'm going to do Rabbi Kiva Eger, sometimes I'm going to do Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, but I'm going to focus on the lamdos. Okay, here we go. Siman Tzadiches Din Isser Shenasari Beheter V'Oifen Bitulai. The laws of Isser that get mixed in Heter and how you nullify it. It says Mechaber Isser Shenasari Beheter. If a davar aser mixes in a davar heter, min b'she'enoi minoi, in a different species, not in the same species. Kagoyin ches lamed beis. For example, ches lamed beis. Now, you know, the Shulchan Aruchs don't have nekudas. So what is the next word? What is that word? Ches lamed beis. There are two ways to read it. It could be chalav, especially if we're just coming from roishay kesem paz, we're just coming from some pezayin, basar b'chalav. You would read it perhaps kagoin chalav shenasarev b'basar. But both the Shach and the Taz say that that's not how you're menakated. It's kagoin chelev shenasarev b'basar. Forbidden fats that get mixed in meat. Let's look in the Shach Siv Katan Aleph. The Taz Siv Katan Aleph says the same thing. Mashmad hainu chelev b'tseirei. The implication is talking about fats with seirei. The hainu tarba's fat. V'chei mashmad batur. V'imkein das hei tesvav. By the way, that's one of the best Rashi Tevos in the Shulchan Aruch. Hei tesvav. Hatur v'Shulchan Aruch. That's it's a good trivia. Hey tesvav. The Torah in the Shulchan Aruch has to hold if fat and meat is min b'she'enoi minoi, then it must be fat tastes differently than meat. The taste of fat is different than the taste of meat. The Shach asks, the Ravan, when the Rishonim says fat and meat have the same taste, it's talking about fatty meat. Fatty meat, fat and meat has the same taste. Regular meat, fat will taste different than meat. So the case of the mechaber is fat falls in to meat. We're talking about forbidden fat. So I'll ask you a simple question. Who told the shach that this word is chelav? Maybe it's chalav. I understand what the shach is saying. He's saying we're talking about fat that fell into meat, but who told him? Maybe it's chalav shenesar b'basar, because it would have the same halacha. Who told him we're talking about fat? So by the way, the Gilyon Marsha, the Gilyon Marsha is written by Rav Shlomo Eger, Maharsha. Right? It's in this edition. It's not. It doesn't appear yet, but in the big Shulchan Aruchs, he brings the Rav Shlomo Eger says it's very obvious how the shach knows we're talking about forbidden fats and not milk, because the mechaber says isser and heter, prohibited into permitted. If it's milk into meat, it's not prohibited into permitted. It's permitted into permitted, and it's the combination that's problematic. Okay, so that's just worthwhile to speak out. Fine. So, if forbidden fat falls into meat, so what would you say the halacha is? Based on what we said, the halacha should be, let's see if there's 60. So now we're going to see 60 is not the first recourse, because the opinion of the mechaber, based on the Gemara says if you want to know, did the forbidden fat give a taste into the meat, what you're going to do is you need to see, does the meat taste like forbidden fat? The thing is, how could a Jew go ahead and eat the meat if it might have forbidden fat in it? So what do you know? In other words, what you need to do is determine whether it tastes like forbidden fat, but you can't take a chance, because if it does, then you partook of forbidden fat. So what you do is you call Tony. Okay, is Tony a good name, by the way, for Oved Kacha Mazalos? Sometimes I pick a name and the guy says, that's my name. So no offense if your name is Tony, but we're going with Tony right now, unless we have to change that. Okay, so you call Oved Koichavim. Yitamenu Oved Koichavim. Im Oimer she'im by tam chelev. If he says, this is such a meaty, pure meaty taste without any, it's so lean. Say, is there any fat in it? No, it's fatless. It's sans fat. If he says there's no fat in it, or he says the meat tastes so good, there's this little fatty taste that tastes very stale. So either he says it doesn't taste like fat, or he says the fat taste is pagam. Oisha oimer sheyesh baitam elashu pagam mutter. It's mutter. Question is, we're believing this guy, Tony? We're believing him. Would you trust him with $1,000? You could trust this guy. You could rely on Oved Kochav Mazalos for Isser V'Heter. Mechaber says you rely on the guy. Now, is this like a special taste tester? No. His only title is he's Oved Kochavim. That's all we know. He serves idols. Terach would have liked him, right? So I like to connect the halacha to the parsha of the week. He's an Oved Kochavim, right? That's the parsha. So apparently we're relying on him. Now, if he says it tastes bad, the mechaber adds, "V'hu shelo yehi soifoi lahashbiach." As long as if he says it tastes bad, it's not going to ultimately taste good. The Mefarshim say, if it does revert to tasting good, so long as it tastes bad, it will be okay. Once it changes to tasting good, then it will be a problem. Now, maybe this guy is lying. Maybe he's trying to be machshel you. The mechaber adds, it has to be that he doesn't know that you're relying on him. He doesn't know you're relying on him. What do we call that in halacha? It's called Meisiach lefi Tumai. It's called Meisiach lefi Tumai. He's just conversing in his innocence. Literally, he's innocently conversing. So he didn't mean, it's not like you go over to him and say, Reb Goy, Reb Noach, I want to tell you something. Reb Guy, we have this law by us Jews that we could eat meat, but we can't have forbidden fat. So we need you to tell us right now, what does this taste like? So now the guy is getting nervous, and then maybe he's thinking, maybe I should tell him it tastes like it's kosher because I always wanted to be machshel him. He can't know we're relying on him. He has to be, so to speak, shooting the breeze. Meisiach lefi tumai. There's an entire Siman in Choshen Mishpat, Meisiach lefi tumai, that when somebody says information casually in innocence, they have a certain believability. Especially, let's say, for example, le'edos isha. Let's say a woman can't find her husband. The husband went overseas. We don't know what happened to him. And a Gentile says, in the course of conversation, you're speaking to the guy. You say, "Nu, what's going on? How's the weather? How's politics? What's going on in Israel? What's going on with the Yankees?" And then all of a sudden, the guy says, "By the way, there's this nice Jew named the Faivel Yankel. I got a call. I saw him. I saw he drowned." You didn't ask him about Faivel Yankel. He offered it on his own. He's Meisiach lefi tumai. There's a special concept that Meisiach lefi tumai has believability. So therefore the Mechaber says, this guy that you're relying on cannot know that you're relying on him. Sorry, this is a complete tangent, but I always find it very interesting. So I prefer giving Yaradeya. Sometimes if I speak, there's a very interesting phenomenon. So I can speak for an hour. I'll give you an example. I one time spoke to seminary girls. That's not my bread and butter. I give shiurim. So, I wasn't, I'm not a regular speaker for them. So I wanted to establish a connection with the audience. I said, by the way, 2 days ago, I just dropped off my daughter to go to seminary. And the Friday night before we dropped her off to go to seminary, I was making kiddush. And, I was crying during kiddush because I was going to miss her. Fine. And then I gave the shir. It was before Yom Naram. After the shir, people came over to me. And the shir was about tshuva. It was divrei soros. The comment was, I wish somebody would have cried when I went to seminary. And I'm thinking, was the shir so completely incomprehensible that the only thing you got out of it was the fact that I wasn't even trying to mention that. It just slipped out. And then I realized that's the koyach of Meisiach lefi tumai. You see, something prepared, you could prepare anything and say anything the way it's prepared. But something that slips out is the most genuine thing that you say, because that's not what you say, that's you. So it has much more believability. Almost every time I give a shir, it's the thing I randomly said that people remember. That's the koyach of Meisiach lefi tumai. It's not something you say, and that's often the most memorable thing. Okay, that's just, I'm just saying that Meisiach lefi tumai, okay? Okay, so that's the shita of the Mechaber. So far, did the Mechaber say one thing about shishim? Not one thing about shishim. He just says, if the fat fell into the food, you want to get a guy to taste it. We're going to see the $1 million question is that we're talking about min b'she'enoi minoi. We're talking about forbidden fat into meat. This is what is called tam ke'ikar. If the forbidden fat fall into meat, and as we said, it has a different taste than the meat, it's giving taste to the meat. Tam ke'ikar is da'iraisa. Are you allowed to eat? Let's say the forbidden fat gives taste to the meat. The isser of eating the meat is d'Rabbanan or da'iraisa? It's going to be an isser da'iraisa. The flavor of something forbidden is like the forbidden item itself. Tam ke'ikar is da'iraisa. By the way, who holds tam ke'ikar is da'iraisa? Just remember this. Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam holds tam ke'ikar is da'iraisa, as opposed to Rashi. Rashi will hold tam ke'ikar is midrabanan. Well, if tam ke'ikar is mid'iraisa, isn't there a rule that you cannot rely on a guy who's meisiach lefi tumai by a da'iraisa? So how in the world you don't know if you could eat this mixture? Maybe the forbidden fat gave flavor to the meat. So you're going to rely on Tony, and because Tony is Meisiach lefi tumai, you're just going to believe him? It's a da'iraisa. We don't rely on Meisiach lefi tumai by da'iraisa. That's a very big question here. The Shach will answer it. The Taz will answer it. They'll both try a number of answers. I'm very excited to tell you the answer of the Crazy Uplesi that is literally off the charts. It's unbelievable. It was worthwhile for your soul to come down from the Kisei HaKavod all the way to Olam Hazeh, just to be here tonight, to hear how the Crazy Uplesi answers this question of how you could rely on a guy by a d'oraisa. Yeah, that was a little dramatic. Okay, so that's the shita of the Mechaber. Now, what if there's no guy? You can't find a guy. You know, if you can't find a guy to taste it, then misharinam b'samach. Then we estimate it based on 60. If you got 60, then the meat is okay. If you don't have 60, the meat is not okay. But the clear implication is, and the Shach in Sivkat and Daled points out, that if you do have a guy, then we will not permit it through 60. In other words, let's say forbidden fat falls into 70 times the amount of forbidden fat. Forbidden fat falls into meat, and you can't find a guy. And it falls into 70 times that amount, and there's a guy on the corner. But why should I rely on the guy? I'll just rely on shivim. You can't rely on shivim. According to the Mechaber, you cannot rely on shishim if the guy is available. That's clear in the Mechaber. The Mechaber says, if there isn't a guy, you can rely on 60. That implies, if there is a guy, you can't rely on 60. Now, if the guy says, let's say it fell into 100, and you say, guy, how is this meat, guy? He says, it's the fattiest meat I ever tasted. And it fell into 100, it's asr. What do you mean you have more than shishim? No. The guy says it's asr. What if it fell into 40? And the guy says, this is the leanest meat I ever had. It's mutter. We rely on the guy. You follow the guy l'chumra u'l'kula. We don't discriminate. We just believe goyim. This is the Siman Sadiches Sif Aleph. Okay? According to Mechaber, we will always follow the Meisiach Lefi Tumai. However, if there is not a guy, then we're going to rely on shishim. Okay? Or v'cheinu min b'minai. What if forbidden fat falls into permitted fat? So now it's not going to help to call the guy. What's the guy going to tell you? There's no taste difference between forbidden fat and permitted fat. So then you're going to rely on 60. You'll always rely on 60. Kivan, deleka, lamekam, ataima. Since you can't establish the taste, misharim besamach. We evaluate it based on 60. So shitas hamachaber is, when min falls into she'enoi minoi, isser into heter, you're going to follow the guy. If the guy says it tastes like meat, if the guy says it tastes like forbidden fat, it's going to be a problem. If it falls into, 500 times that much. I don't know what the threshold is. If the guy says it doesn't taste like meat, doesn't taste like fat, it will be permitted even if it falls into 10, I guess. We don't know exactly what the threshold is. If you can't get a guy, or if it's min b'minai, then we're going to evaluate it based on 60. Sure.
On this English thing, it says, Dal Shach, according to the Mechaber, it is preferable for a non-Jew to always taste it. It's not true. If it's, you have to. Not preferable. Right?
That's what it says over here.
11, page 11.
Okay. I can't take responsibility.
Page 11, Dalit.
What? Page 11?
Dalit, those Dalit.
Dal Shach, according to the Mechaber, it is preferable for a non-Jew to taste it always.
I mean, he has to. If he's there, he has to. He can't rely on anything. He can't rely on shisha.
Correct. The English is also not, it is preferable to the always. Okay. It's not preferable. It's imperative. Yeah. I agree. Maskim. Okay? So now let us begin with the Shach, Sivkatan. By the way, let's see the Ramah. Says the Ramah, and you should remember this because we had this earlier by Tzinayin in Siman, for those who learned Basar B'chalav. The Ramah Shita is we don't rely on Gentile taste testers. Bizman hazeh. Okay? The Ramah says, Noyagim achshav lismoich ha'oivei kechavim. I'm sorry. The minhag is we are not noyeg to rely on Gentiles. We will evaluate everything based on 60. According to Ramah, we do not rely on a Gentile taste tester. Now that implies, and we're going to see in the Shach Siv Katan Hey, that it's not we don't rely on tasters, we don't rely on Gentiles. If there would be something that we could use a Jewish taster for example, let's say you have a vegetable that was cut with a meat knife, and you want to know, does the vegetable taste like meat? So I don't need a goy for that, I could get a Jew for that. That implies we would rely on a Jew. It's just we don't rely on goyim. Okay? We don't rely on goyim. We're going to jump right into Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva wants to know, I have no idea why. Why wouldn't we rely on goyim? Why not? What is it about it? Because you say, what do you mean? We can't trust them. The Gemara says you can rely on them. You know? Now, we'll have to understand because that Gemara seems to be fly in the face of other Gemaras that say we cannot rely on a guy who's Meisiach Lefi Tumai by a Da'iraisa. But the Gemara does say that when forbidden fat falls into meat, you could get a Gentile taste tester. So Rabbi Kiva wants to know, what's the Ramah saying? Nowadays, we can't rely on goyim. What happened? What, in Krakow they had different kinds of goyim? It's Nishtana Hateva. Rabbi Kiva wants to know what's the chumrah of not relying on goyim for tasting if the Gemara says you could? I'm not giving you the answer yet. First we have to have some of the background of the Shach and the Taz. Let's begin with Shach Sivkatan Beis. Okay, Shach and Sivkatan Beis says that this guy who's tasting it, V'tzarich Shaloi Yeda Shesoim Chen Olav, like the Mechaber himself said, the guy cannot know you're relying on him. It has to be you're just shooting the breeze, you're eating cornflakes, and he's eating meat with forbidden fat in it, and you're both commenting on the food. You know, cornflakes, I like the rooster on the cereal box. I don't know what. And then, you're just schmoozing with him, and then you say, how's your meal? And he tells you, he just comments, this is the leanest meat I ever had. He said, really? It looks pretty fatty to me. And he says, fatty? I don't taste any fat in this. So now the Shach quotes the Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef pasak de'a'oived koichavim de'lav kefela. This is a key word over here. The word kefela is a baker or a chef. Okay, a professional chef, a professional taste tester. The Beis Yosef says the guy, even if he's not a kfela, which he says is a nachtoim uman, which is a professional baker, even though this guy is not a professional baker, he doesn't have a sophisticated palate. He, in his spare time, he has hot dog contests. He doesn't have a very sophisticated taste buds. Samchinan alei b'meisiach lefi tumai. Dafka. We'll only rely on him if he is conversing in innocence. Ve'akfela, but if he's a professional chef, samchinan afilu eino meisiach lefi tumai. We'll rely on him even if he's not meisiach lefi tumai. Why? T'loi mishaker, he's not going to lie. Shelo yafsid umanusai, because he is not going to want to ruin his job. Okay, the Beis Yosef has a very interesting chiddush because the Gemara talks about different possibilities of when we believe a guy about taste. Is it only if he's meisiach lefi tumai, or is it, and he doesn't have to be a professional, or is it only if he is a professional, and even if he's not meisiach lefi tumai? You see, what meisiach lefi tumai does is the guy doesn't know we're relying on him, so he says it in innocence, and we have no reason to assume he's intentionally lying. In other words, if he's meisiach lefi tumai, he's saying it in good faith. On the other hand, the kfela, the expert, even if he is saying it because he knows we're relying on him, but the thing is his whole career is in jeopardy, because since he's a professional, if he's going to be caught lying to us, he's going to lose his occupation. So the Beis Yosef says, either one of these two factors would be enough for the Gentile to be believed. Either meisiach lefi tumai or kefela. So then, if either one is good, if the Mechaber says that the guy here is believed by meisiach lefi tumai, then obviously we're not talking about a kfela, we're not talking about a professional chef. So it has become clear over here. Here in our Sif, we must be talking about a guy who's not a professional chef. And therefore it's required that we don't know that he doesn't know that we're relying on him. Okay? So there are two possible scenarios that we rely that we will believe the guy, either Meisiach lefi Tumo or kafela. Okay. So here comes the $1 million question of the night. You ready? In Sif Beis, the Mechaber talks about the following scenario. A piece of forbidden fat fell into meat. And you know the meat is the roiv against the forbidden fat. But some of it got spilled out. So you can't tell now whether there's shishim or there's not shishim. Mutar Asar. You know there was roiv, but you cannot determine if there was 60 or not. Again, min b'she'eino mina, where it's noisein tam. The Mechaber says it's asar. Why is it asar? Presumably because since it's min b'she'eino mina, yes, it's true, we know there was a roiv, but we don't know if there was shishim, and we have no way to determine if there was shishim. And we know min b'she'eino mina is noisein tam. The Mechaber clearly holds that it's asar because safek da'iraisa l'chumra tam ke'ikar. The Mechaber is paskening like Rabbeinu Tam ke'ikar. Safek da'iraisa l'chumra. You see, if it falls in min b'minai, and you know there was roiv, but you don't know if there's shishim, remember, if it's the same species, so it's not giving taste, so you only need shishim midrabanan. So if you're not sure if there's shishim, the Mechaber says you could be mekel. Why? Savik drabanan lakula. But if it's min b'she'enoi minoi and it got spilled out, and you don't know if there was shishim, you have to be machmir. That means the Mechaber in Sif Beis is paskening tam ke'ikers dairaisa. So that means we're dealing with a potential dairaisa here. If the forbidden fat gave taste to the meat, it's a dairaisa. Asks the shach, so how in the world could you rely on the guy? We know there's a rule in Shas, in Perek HaGoizel Basra, Ein Oived Koichavim Meisiach Lefi Tumo Neman Be'isr Torah Ella Be'edos Isha Levad. I'll read the whole question, okay? This is on the, I'm going to open up the Chavra, the Hilchos book, otherwise I might get in trouble if I don't use it. Okay. Says the Shach, the first wide line. When we call Makom Kashali, Kivan the Pasak B'Sif Beis. Since we pass in B'Sif Beis, it might be worthwhile. The lines I read, it's probably kedai to underline them, because again, we're not going to read every line, and this way at least you know what to refer back to. When we call Makom Kashali, Kivan the Pasak B'Sif Beis. Since the Mechaber passes the Beis, the Min B'She'eino Minoi Asar Midaraisa, that if one species falls into another, it's an Issa Daraisa Kol Shenoisin Tam. In Kain Echiyah Goy Nema Meisiach V'Tumai. How could a Gentile be believed if he just says in the course of conversation, V'haloi Shas Aruchahi, it's an explicit Gemara, B'Perek HaGoizel Basra, De'ein Goy Meisiach V'Tumai Neman Be'Isr Torah, Ella Be'edos Isha Levad. The only time we could believe a guy by something midairaisa is if it's to testify that a husband died to allow a woman to remarry. And the Bahag paskins that way, and the Rif, and the Rush, and the Smag, they all paskin. So you say, why is this a kasha on the Mechaber? The Mechaber is just taking this from the Rambam. So, meaning what the Shach is getting at is, this is not a kasha on the Shach. I'm sorry, this is not a kasha on the Mechaber. You can ask the same question on the Rambam. The Rambam also paskins that you rely on a guy who's not a baker if he's Meisiach Lefi Tumo. So who am I to ask on the Mechaber? All the Mefarshim of the Rambam should attack the Rambam, and whatever the Rambam's going to say, the Mechaber will say, I'll say. Says the Shach, there's no kasha on the Rambam. The Rambam could hold like Rashi that Tam Keker is not Doiraisa. Maybe the Rambam holds like Rashi that when forbidden fat falls into meat, the taste transfer is only a rabbinic problem. So therefore, if you're not sure if they're shishim, maybe you would be lenient. So there's no kasha on the Rambam. The Rambam could hold like Rashi, but the Mechaber holds like Rabbeinu Tam, that Tam Keker is Dairaisa. So if Tam Keker is Dairaisa, how could the Mechaber rely on a guy who's Meisiach Lefi Tumai? And then the Shach sets it up. This is a kasha on the Rashba, who also says Tam Keker is Dairaisa.
How do we extrapolate from the case of Edus Isha, though, that requires Edus based in? Maybe this is, this is a piece of meat. This is just Easter of a head.
No. But again, the Gemara says that we don't believe a guy who's Meisiach Lefi Tumai except for Edus Isha. The only leniency is Edus Isha. We're only lenient for Edus Isha. We would not be believed for any other Edus. Oh, so you're saying maybe we wouldn't believe for other Edus, but do we really need Edus over here? Okay.
You need Adam to come into based in on a...
Okay, good. We'll come to that point in the Taz. Very good. Okay, but right now the question is based on the Gemara that says we don't believe a guy is Meisiach Lefi Tumai only by Edus Isha. So now I want to tell you two potential answers to this question. The Shach doesn't like either of them, but the Taz entertains one of them. It's worthwhile to know both of them. The first one is more worthwhile to know, okay? This is a potential answer. It's going to be where the Shach says, V'doichek loimar. Okay, I'm telling you a potential answer. V'doichek loimar. Okay, next time, hopefully I'll try to coordinate where this is.
So 11 lines to the bottom?
11 lines to the bottom? Yeah, thank you. 11 lines on the bottom. V'doichek loimar. Says the Shach, you know what? What is this whole question based on? Based on the fact that in Sif Beis, the Mechaber holds Tam Keker's Dairaisa? Maybe just in Sif Beis, the Mechaber wants to know if forbidden fat falls into meat, and you know there was roiv meat, but you don't know if there was shishim or not. Most poskim will say that you need shishim midairaisa, namely Rabbeinu Tam. Rashi would say you don't need shishim midairaisa. So l'chumra in Sif Beis, the Mechaber says that you need shishim, and if you don't know if there was shishim, it's asar. In deference to Rabbeinu Tam, who holds Tam Keker's Dairaisa, the Mechaber would hold that since you don't know if there's shishim, it's asar. But that doesn't mean that the Mechaber is not aware that there's a lenient opinion, namely Rashi, that Tam Keker is only midrabanan. And therefore, in Sif Aleph, you can't ask a question. How could the Mechaber say you believe a guy, but you're believing a guy by a Dairaisa? It's not for sure Dairaisa. Only Rabbeinu Tam holds it's Dairaisa. Yeah, but the Mechaber paskin like Rabbeinu Tam. He paskin like Rabbeinu Tam l'chumra. But there's still, he entertains that Rashi's opinion is still of value, and combining Rashi's lenient opinion that taste transfer is only Drabanan, and relying on a guy Meisiach Lefi Tumai, the Mechaber says in Sif Aleph you could rely on the guy. In other words, it's not definitive that the Mechaber holds Tam Keker's Dairaisa, it's just as a chumrah, the Shach says that's doichek. Okay? Another potential difference between the Gemara that says we never rely on a goy that's Meisiach lefi Tumai except for Eidos Isha is, you know when we don't rely on a goy? That's when there was definitive Isser and we need the goy to extricate us from a state of Isser. Namely, the woman was married. We don't know if the guy died. So then we'll rely on a guy that the guy died. But in other scenarios where there was Vada Yisr, then we're not going to rely on a guy to extricate us from Vada Yisr. But in our case over here in Seif Aleph, the forbidden fat fell into the meat, but we don't know if it gave taste. We don't know if there was Yisr. So it's Lo Yischazik Yisura. So it's Lo Yischazik Yisura. You understand what Lo Yischazik Yisura means? Yischazik Yisura means when there was definite Isser. This woman was a married woman. Now the question is, can we rely on the guy to extricate her from her status of being married? No, you can't rely on a guy except for Eidos Isha. However, in a case where you're not sure if Isser was ever created in the first place, then you can rely on the guy that the Isser wasn't created. That's another doichek that the Shach does not want to rely on as a potential difference. So therefore, we return back to the $1 million question. How could the Mechaber say that we're going to believe a guy who's Meisiach lefi Tumai, but presumably we're dealing with Tam Ke'ikar Dairaisa, and we do not believe Gentiles by Yisurei Dairaisa? You ready for the answer? Because a question that's $1 million, the answer has to be at least $1,001,001. The answer is found on page 10 in the holy Chavra de Hilchos Shulchan Aruch. That's found on, where is it? It's bolded. Wow, you see that? Bolded. It's the 5th wide line on page 10. And in the regular Shulchan Aruch, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. The 6th line on page Reish Chavav says the Shach. You know when we don't believe a guy? That's when you have to believe the guy. But when we ask Tony, hey Tony, what does this taste like? Tony's saying, you know, I really want to get this Jew. I'm going to tell him it doesn't taste like fat. The only thing is, if he asks me and I give an answer, what if he goes and he double checks it with Pete? He could ask Pete. That's a good name for sure. He could ask Pete, and Pete, he might contradict me. So since we could fact check it. Tony is afraid to lie. You know when we don't rely on a guy? When you have to rely on the guy, and the guy said, I can say whatever I want, they'll never know either way. There's no way to check me. But if there's a way to check him, because again, we're talking about asking a guy who's not an expert and is Meisiach lefi Tumai. So the guy says, I better tell the truth, because they could take it to an expert. Or even if you take it to an expert, that I think the expert said maybe he'll take it to a different expert. It's only if you cannot determine the veracity, you can't fact check him, then the guy is not believed. Aval b'min b'she'enoi minoi. What are we talking about here? We're talking about two different species, so there could be a taste transfer. Kivan de'ika l'meika malad milsa, since you could fact check him, l'hatimai l'kfela, to give the taste to an expert, samchinan alei, we can rely on him. It's a very reasonable svara. The Gemara that says we don't rely on goyim, that's when you have to completely rely on them. But if you wait to verify, they're going to be afraid to lie. That's the shach. Now let's go to the Taz. I'm going to skip the first part of the Taz first, because I want to go to the part where he asks the Shach's question. It's the 4th wide line in the Taz. In the Chavra Hilchos edition, the question begins. You see on page 9, midway through, it's bolded v'hachya tamenu goy. This said, it says a goy teised mashma fil lav kfela. It's mashma even if he's not an expert. Shekain diktik beis Yosef from the Rambam, because the Rambam says you get a goy. He doesn't say an expert. So the ikar heter is Meisiach lefi tumai. So he brings the question of the Bedek Habayis, the same question that the Shach brought. Ein Meisiach lefi tumai neman ella le'edos isha. Because by edos isha, we're not even really relying on the witness. We're really relying on the woman. You know, when a witness tells a woman, your husband died, we're not really relying on the witness. We're relying on the woman, right? Because Isha Daiko Minsaba. The woman wouldn't get remarried unless she kricht arayin in what's going on. She yented around and she determined the husband's dead. So it's not really relying on the aid, it's really relying on the woman. So again, we're back to the $1 million question. The Taz also offers some of the possibilities that we mentioned, namely, let's say for example, he says "U'be'emes kasa beis Yosef b'shem trumas hadesh na'arach demaskim Rabbeinu Tam d'Israel de'araisa." Even though the beis Yosef, you see where it says "U'be'emes." Okay, U'be'emes. This is where he says the same doichek as the Shach. The truth is, the beis Yosef says in the name of the Torah Habayis that he's maskim with Rabbeinu Tam, that it's Dairaisa. It could be he's not maskim only Be'ikar Hadin, but regarding Meisiach Lefi Tumai, he would rely on Rashi that Tam Kikar is not Dairaisa. Okay, here's the answer. The answer of the Taz, the Shach's answer is, you could rely on a guy here. Why? Because he's afraid to lie, because we should check him out. The Taz says, like my father said, that when it comes to, when the Gemara says we don't rely on a goy who's Meisiach lefi tumai only for Eidos Isha, that's if we don't rely on a goy when we need testimony. When you need testimony, we can't rely on a goy who's Meisiach lefi tumai except for by Eidos Isha. We don't need two witnesses to come in. We don't need two witnesses to come into Bezdin and to testify. We hereby proclaim that this meat doesn't taste like fat. We don't need eidos. We just need haychacha. When you need testimony, you can't rely on a Gentile's Meisiach lefi tumai except for by eidos isha. But what if you don't need actual testimony? You just need to have some kind of evidence. If you just need evidence, then a guy who, in the course of his conversation, is saying, by the way, this doesn't taste like forbidden fat, we could rely on it. You don't need actual testimony. You don't need witnesses. It's isurim. It's eid echad neman b'isurim. By the way, the proof is, what if he's not Meisiach lefi tumai? What if he's just an expert? So we say a kfela is believed. Why is a kfela believed? He's not going to want to lose his job. Okay. Yeah, but that's not eidos. That's only a chazaka. That's only a presumption that he's not going to want to lie. So how do you rely on an expert? The answer is because you don't need eidos here, you just need evidence. So just like kefela, an expert is relied upon based on chazaka, that loimara umnase, he's not going to lose his job, so too Meisiach lefi tumai, we could rely on Goyim who are Meisiach lefi tumai as long as eidos is not required. Exactly how to define what the threshold of testimony is as opposed to proof is not so clear. But if you look, let's read the words of the Taz inside, because I want to tell you, Rabbi Yonason Eibeshitz, you're going to flip. You're going to flip, even though it may have been many years since you flipped. You know how to? This Rabbi Yonason Eibeshitz is okay. V'nirali, the Harajba, the Harash. This is in the Taz, the bold lines 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines from the bottom on page 9. V'nirali the Harajba, the Harash Svirulei, the Hadamrino b'Hagoizal. This that we say, De'ein Meisiach lefi tumai neman b'mili da'araisa, that Meisiach lefi tumai is not believed by da'araisa. Hainu b'midi de'bayedos. That's something that requires testimony. Davka. Ma'she'in kain b'isr v'heter, as opposed to just laws of prohibited and permitted, shaper mahani, then you could use Meisiach Lefi Tumai, de bezeh, because in this, loy ba'inon eidos gemura, you don't need outright eidos, ela be'im yesh lanu haychacha sagi, all you need is a proof. The proof is, Eid Echad is Neman B'Yisurim. So obviously you don't need eidos. And furthermore, you could believe a kavela. That means you don't need eidos. Okay, so that's another answer. So the Shach says, the rule that we don't believe a guy, except for eidos isha by Meisiach Lefi Tumai, is only when you can't fact check him. The Taz says, the only time you don't believe a guy who's Meisiach Lefi Tumai by Dairaisa is only when you need eidos. You ready? Comes Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz in the Kreisi Uplesi. And Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz says, Avada, when it comes to a Dairaisa, you do not believe Goyim or Meisiach Lefi Tumai ever. Ever. So why do we do it here? What do you mean why do we do it here? Because we're not talking about a Dairaisa here. What do you mean? I thought the Mechaber holds Tam Ke'iker's Dairaisa. Yeah, it is. So that's why, if the guy tells me it doesn't taste like forbidden fat, I'm not allowed to swallow it. But what would be, are you allowed to put something treif in your mouth and spit it out? Question. What?
No, is it form of
Am I allowed to put a piece of pig in my mouth, taste it, and spit it out? Yes or no? Pig, it doesn't say you're not allowed to get enough from it, okay? You're only allowed to eat it. Am I allowed? The answer is midaraisa, I could do it. So why don't we do it? Why don't you see, why in the yeshivas you send your kids to, do they not serve chazer and tell the kids to spit it out? The answer is because asur midrabanan. So says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, you're right! The Mechaber paskins like Rabbeinu Tam Ke'iker's Dairaisa. But what are you asking the guy? You're asking the guy, does it taste like forbidden fat? He says, no. I still can't swallow it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in my mouth. If it doesn't taste like forbidden fat, then I'll swallow it. And if it does taste like forbidden fat, I'll spit it out. Yeah, but if it tastes like forbidden fat, it was over. Yeah, it was over at the Rabbana. And for that you can rely on Meisiach Lefi Tumai. By the way, you don't have to know this. The Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. Okay, so if it's like too much, if just the fact that I said Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, you said this is not what I signed up for, make believe I didn't say it. You don't have to know it. Okay, but I'm just telling you for extra credit. The Menahel is going to give you a treat or something. That's Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. That you're right, the Mechaber absolutely, it's doichik to say that the Mechaber is only choishesh for Rabbeinu Tam. He paskins like Rabbeinu Tam. Tam Ke'iker is Dairaisa. I have Tam Ke'iker is Dairaisa. How could you rely on the guy? Because I'm relying on the guy to put it in my mouth. If it tastes like forbidden fat, I will then spit it out. If it doesn't, I will swallow it. I'm only relying on him then for an Isser Drabanan, not an Isser Dairaisa.
So why can't you taste the outright?
What?
Why can't you taste the outright then?
Because it's a Drabanan. Right? Because it's a Drabanan. But I'll rely on the guy buying a Drabanan. The only thing is the Shach and the Taz didn't say that. Why not? Because the whole Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz is assuming that by putting the thing in your mouth, you could determine, without swallowing it, that it doesn't taste like forbidden fat. But it's not so pasha. The Prima Gadim says that in order to really determine whether it tastes like forbidden fat, you can't just put it in your mouth. You got to eat it. You got to eat it. And if Tam Ke'iker is Dairaisa, that's a Isser Dairaisa. It happens to be in the beginning of the Taz, Sif Katan Beis, the Taz asked, why do you need to get a guy? Why can't you just put it in your mouth? If the Taz in the beginning of Sif Katan Beis says, why do you need a guy to taste it? Why can't the Jew taste it? And we know from Siman Membez, by a gallbladder, if you want to know if it was salted, you're allowed to put it in your mouth. B'makam safek. So the Taz says, because here it's not going to help to put it in your mouth. You got to swallow it to determine whether it tastes like forbidden fat. So that's probably why the Shach and the Taz did not say Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz's answer, because don't say, I'm only relying on the guy to taste it, and if it doesn't taste good, then I'll swallow it, because you can't determine whether it tastes like forbidden fat until you swallowed it, and then it's too late. By that time already, in other words, the whole Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz is presuming you could determine by tasting it whether it tastes like the forbidden fats or not. But it's not so pashut. It could be you really have to swallow it to determine whether it tastes like forbidden fats. Okay? So we learned today 5 answers to the $1 million question of how could the Mechaber say that we rely on a guy who's Meisiach Lefi Tumai, but the Mechaber in Sif Beis Paskins, Tam Kiker's Dairaisa, and the Gemara says that we don't rely on Meisiach Lefi Tumai except for Eidos Isha. So we learned 5 answers. 2 of them were Daichik. Answer number 1 is the Shach. You know why we could rely on the guy? Because we could fact check him. Answer number 2 is the Taz. You know why you could rely on the guy? Because we don't need Eidos here. Then the Shach said, well, maybe we could rely on the guy because it's loyis chazek isura. It's a question whether the Isser ever came in the first place. The Shach didn't like that answer. Or the Shach says, well, maybe really the Mechaber is not absolutely certain Tam Kiker's Dairaisa. Maybe he was only Choishesh Tam Kiker's Dairaisa, but he definitely takes into account the opinion of Rashi. Tam Kiker's not Dairaisa, and therefore you could rely on the guy. And we learned Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz's answer that you could rely on the guy because all you need to do is rely on him to put it in your mouth, and then you'll determine. Okay. Now, we for sure have to finish Sif. There are 2 things we for sure have to do. We have to finish Sif Aleph, and we have to do Rabbi Kiveger. Okay? So Sif Aleph, okay, let's see the Shach Sif Katan Hey. This is the last Shach on Sif Aleph. The Shach said, the Ramah says, nowadays we don't rely on Goyim. Why did the Shach say we don't rely on Goyim? Maybe we don't rely on any tasters. That implies we don't rely on Oivikacham Azolais. But, here, let's read it inside. Shachs of Katanhe. Midoloi kamar ve'inoi genachshav lismech ha'te'ima. From the fact that the Ramah didn't say that nowadays we don't rely on tasting. Ve'kamar, but he says ve'inoi genachshav lismech ha'oivkachavim. He says we don't rely on goyim. Mashma dafka ha'oived kaychavim hu doloi samchinan. It's dafka on goyim we don't rely. Mishum do'oived kaychavim hu, because he's a idolater. Aval ha'te'imas Yisrael. But if a Jew were to taste it, samchinan, we would rely on him, b'min b'she'enoi minai. So you say, what could an example? You want to know, could we rely on Yehudi, Michal Shazvar Hesher, or son that? There's a famous question. Where's the guy in China? I don't know. There's a famous question: can a Ashkenazi Jew give it to a Sephardi Jew, and then the Sephardi Jew could give it to a guy? That's a good one. Anyway, but the question is, what does the Shach mean that nowadays we don't rely on a guy, but we could rely on a Jew? For what? Let's say Truma fell into regular chulin, and you don't know, does it taste like Truma, does it not taste like Truma? So what do? You call a kohen. So it's okay, very nice. Could you do that? You could do that, but it's not negeh. There's no Truma bizman hazeh. The simple application would be, you cut a vegetable with a fleshik knife, and you want to know, does it taste like fleshik or not? Now, let's say you're milchiks, and you want to know, or vice versa. You want to know, does it taste like fleshiks? Could you give it to a Jew who's fleshiks to taste it? the Shach paskins, yes. And the Rama is mashma, you could. Because it's only we don't rely on a guy, we would rely on a Jew. Here, look, I want to show you inside. Inami le'inyan ti'imas basar aychalav. Or regarding tasting meat or milk, kamay tsenoin, like a radish, uchai gavna, where you could rely on a Jew. We had that in Siman Sadi Vav. Now, the Shach quotes the opinion of the Atera Zahav, that's the Lavush, that we don't rely on tasting at all, Bizman Hazeh, and the Shach says it's not true. We do rely on Jewish tasting, not on Gentile tasting. Okay, so that's what we're going to do tonight, and we'll end off with Rabbi Kiveger. Okay, so the opinion of the Rama is, nowadays, Ein lismaicha oived koichavim. Why? Why? The Gemara says we do rely on them. So why do we not rely on them as manazeh? Rabbi Kiveger says, Lo yadati tam nachen bazeh. I don't know a good reason. So listen to this. There's a big shaila in the Rishonim. The Gemara says we can rely on a guy. The Gemara is mashma, or maybe only if he's Meisiach Lafi Tumai, or maybe only if he's a kefela, an expert chef, or maybe you need both. You need him to be an expert chef and Meisiach Lafi Tumai. Now, why would you need both? Well, let's get into the nitty-gritty. What's the advantage of Meisiach Lafi Tumai? Well, maybe he's lying, so his Meisiach Lafi Tumai, there's no reason to assume he's lying. He just said it in his innocence. And what's the advantage of a chef? There's a chakira. One pshat is, well, if he lies, then he's going to lose his job. Or maybe you're going to ask Tony whether it tastes like forbidden fat. The guy is I don't know what he does for a living. He works in the sewer. He's going to tell you whether it has traces of fatty substance in the taste. How could he know such a thing? He's not an expert. Maybe the reason we don't believe is because he's not an expert. But if someone's an expert, then they do know. In other words, what's the advantage of being a kfela? Is it that he's more believed because he doesn't want to lose his job? Or is it because he knows? So says Rabbi Kiveger, we don't know what the Gemara means. Does the Gemara mean that you need to be Meisiach Lafi Tumai, which gives you believability, and you need to be an expert, because that gives you the know-how. So you'll say, and therefore maybe you need both. So you say, okay, so at least we should be able to believe a guy, Bizman Hazeh, if he's an expert and he's Meisiach Lafi Tumai. No, because maybe the advantage of being an expert is not the know-how, maybe it's he doesn't want to lose his job. And then, how are we going to believe him? If he's not Meisiach Lafi Tumai? No, maybe the Gemara means you need to be both. So you need to have the know-how and the believability. Oh no, so you'll say, okay, so we'll get both. No, maybe the pshat in being a kfela is he doesn't want to lose his job. But if he said it Meisiach Lafi Tumai, then he didn't even realize he would lose his job. So we can't be machmer on that chumrah. Says Rabbi Kiveger, there are different ways of learning the Gemara. It's not that we don't believe Guy in Bizman Hazeh. The Gemara says we could believe a Guy. The problem is we accept the Gemara, we could believe a Guy, but we don't know what the Gemara means, because what's the lumdus of Meisiach Lafi Tumai gives believability. Kfela either gives believability or it gives know-how. So we're not sure. Because if you're going to be machmer on all the chumras and say, okay, so at least we'll only believe him if he's an expert and Meisiach Lafi Tumai, the Meisiach Lafi Tumai may undermine him being an expert. Because why does an expert have believability? Because he doesn't want to lose his job. But that's only if he's concentrating on what he's saying. But if he's saying it Meisiach Lafi Tumai, then you can't say, oh, he's definitely telling the truth. He wouldn't have wanted to lose his job. But he just spit it out of his mouth. So there is you lose Mara Amnusai if you require Kfela and Meisiach Lefi Tumai. But if you don't require Meisiach Lefi Tumai, well, maybe the Gemara really means to require both. So Rabbi Akiva Eiger says, since we cannot interpret this Gemara, we have to be machmir on, if you're machmir on all the perushim in the Gemara, then it would come out there's no way to believe the guy.
I heard Rabbi Reisman ask, why don't you just get 2 kfelas? One Meisiach Tumah.
Rabbi Reisman's on the shir? What?
I once heard Rabbi Reisman in the shir asked, just get 2 kfelas.
Get 2.
Why won't be Meisiach Lefi Tumah? And go to another kfela to ask him for his expert opinion.
What you get 2 independent kfelas.
Each one is half wrong, half right.
Yeah.
Half wrong. You don't have one.
You mean one of them, but Miman of Shach, one of them is right.
You're relying on, you're not relying on a good.
And if they don't know each other, what's the difference? Rabbi Akiva Eiger's shita still comes with questions, those things.
So that, get 2 kfelais. One of them will be Meisiach Lefi Tumai, and one of them will not be Meisiach Lefi Tumai. Maybe you could. Who said you can't? It just says, on one guy, if you could get 2 guys. Nah, that's not what it's. Rabbi Akiva Eiger is still not satisfied with that, because by an Isser D'Rabbanan, though, we should rely on Meisiach Lefi Tumai. Okay. That was the lumdus of Rabbi Akiva Eiger. In other words, that you can't put together all the chumras.
What does the mechaber types up of an expert? So is it the know-how or is it the reputation?
You know, the mechaber here doesn't talk about kfela. The Meisiach talks about kfela. The mechaber only talks about Meisiach Lefi Tumai. Why didn't the mechaber say get an expert? I don't know. But it seems like he would hold you could get an expert. Yeah, I think we'll hold it here today. I want to do Sipeza. The introductions was took a little bit of time. Okay, so that's a good haskalah. Shkayach everyone. So next week it's going to be Bez Hashem Sunday night. Okay. Shkayach.